Hey, thank you for joining us. We are in the middle of doing a series of videos all about the vision that we feel the Lord has given us for Catch the Fire Church in Toronto. And this has been a really interesting process as we've spent time together as pastors and staff at the church. We've sought prophetic input. We've been talking with our board, really just got as much input as we can in this journey of, Lord, what do you want us as a church, as a congregation, to look like 5-10 years from now? What's the destination? And so Dallas and I are here together, and we want to chat about this one area that's kind of emerged as something I would say actually quite key to God's plan for us as a congregation. When we looked over a number of prophetic words, creativity came out a lot, and artistry and artisans. And I was amazed, actually, looking over all the prophetic words over the years, how much this was a very core component of who God's called us to be. So let me read out the statement that we've written down, and then I just want to dive into it with Dallas. And this is unplanned, guys. We don't know what we're going to say, but it's helpful for us to just kind of unpack and explore this as a topic. So the statement's this: we are creative people pushing the boundaries of innovation and artistry to freshly express the nature of God. Dal, I was just saying to everyone, like, that we've seen in prophetic words, this is important to God. Why do you think this is important?
Yeah, that's such a great question. My approach to creativity is, I would say it's twofold. There's I don't want to say selfish nature to it, but off the bat, I'm like, oh, I am creative and I love to create.
Right.
And when I create, my soul comes alive, my heart comes alive. And I just feel like I'm stepping into an element of who I am and feeling alive and feeling full of purpose. And so that's just like really powerful for me. And like to create, that's how I feel alive when I'm creating. And that's just this really beautiful part of being alive and whatever, And then the other side of that is, I think, innovation and creativity is so important as well, because we can benefit. We do that for the benefit of people around us, right? So sometimes there's very practical implications of that, whether it's inventions or whatever, or technology, and then there's also like spiritual ones of like our creativity helps someone encounter God or elements of His nature. I know we have that in this statement of expressing the nature of God, and so I think those are when I think of why it's important. That's what I think of. I'm like, oh well, because it's in our DNA to be creative and to create. So I think it's important for us to be who we are and experience the fullness of life through creating and being creative. And also, we get to bless people. We get to help society, and we get to help others encounter the nature of God through what we create. So that's why I think it's really important.
I love that you've kind of pulled out that DNA factor, and that it's sort of in you to create, to be creative.
Yeah.
Because obviously God is creator, right? Like He created the heavens and the earth. He created us. And if we're made in His image, then we also carry that creative urge, that need and that desire to express. And I was just thinking about, what it says in here, like to freshly express, like in innovation and artistry, to freshly express the nature of God. And there's something about creativity that brings like a freshness, doesn't it? Like, we're, if people are familiar with our church, they'll know we're not that systematic and routine. Obviously, every kind of culture gets its own traditions and kind of liturgy, as it were. But we're often pushing to try and express our love to God and express His nature in fresh ways. And honestly, that's kind of important to me, because it doesn't take long for me to get bored of the same ways that we're always going to do things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that this is, we look at this statement in kind of two dimensions, really. There's what we do when we do church. Yeah. Whether that's at home or, in the church building. Yeah. But there's also the individuals. And I feel like creativity sometimes gets pigeonholed into the kind of creative arts type
Right. Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But creativity is much bigger than that,
Yeah.
right? Like, talk a bit about that and just some of the people that you've seen in your life that have expressed creativity in a way that they may not even realize is creativity.
Yeah, this was something I was just thinking about. So I'm glad you brought it up, because I feel like there's this group of people that as soon as you say the word creative, they check out of like, that's not me. Like that's the singers and the dancers and the painters and whatever else. Like, go for it, creative people. I'll be over here, right? And I think it'd just be great for us just to completely break that down and be like, no, we are actually all creative people. But what does it look like for you to be creative? What has God put in your heart to create? And I'm trying to think of, you asked about people in my life. I don't know if I think of anything off the bat that's too specific, but just like, like if you're a builder, you're creating homes, and how can I build the best home and be creative in that place? If you're a doctor and you work in medicine, it's like, oh, like, how can I be innovative and hear God's heart and express his nature through what I'm doing and healing and creating and that. And so I don't want to get too vague with it, but I would actually love to hear your thoughts on this as well, of like, what do you think it looks like actually for all of us to be creative in our own sphere, with the things that are passionate to us, because I mean, people, I'm a musician, I'm a worship leader. So often my creative expression looks like this, right? Like does look like singing and does look like songwriting. And, but I would love to just for you to even speak on what you think that can look like for other people, or how other people can tap into that creativity when it doesn't look like the status quo. Oh, like, creative arts.
Yeah. I love it. I think there's a really interesting tension, for all of us. Like, I believe that we as believers should be so filled with the nature of God and inspired by the Holy Spirit that we are pioneering in every kind of sector of society. Like, God's kind of blueprints and ideas from heaven are being downloaded, and you're seeing Christian thought leaders in every kind of sector, and like we're saying, some of those people don't necessarily think of themselves as creative, but actually maybe there's people who are innovating, new ways to get medicine to people who can't get it normally. And they're like, I'm not a creative person. Yeah. But that actually is totally innovation. Yeah. And so I love that, first and foremost, this kind of, for us to be so in tune with God and the Holy Spirit that he's giving us these ideas. Yeah. But the tension that I'm referring to is that he has already created us as creative people. And I had this really interesting experience recently where I was in a beautiful place. I was away on vacation. I was looking at this incredible view, but I was talking to God about a situation. I was like, Lord, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do, Lord? And he was like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, no, I want to know what you want me to do, God. Like, just give me instructions. Yeah. I'll follow instructions, and that way I can't fail. And I just felt the Lord say, hey, look around, like, look at this beautiful view. And I saw, God's creation, his creativity, nature. Oh, it was stunning. Yeah. And then he was like, and now look at man's creation intersecting with it. Yeah. And I looked at these structures and like bridges and the concrete and the sharp lines and this kind of man-made artistry and creativity intersecting with God's creation. Yeah. And he just said, that's more beautiful. Like, I love to partner with my sons and daughters for their creativity to meet my creativity. That's so cool. And that is even more beautiful. Yeah. And I just felt this kind of challenge from God to not just kind of be a robot, but to actually express my creativity. Yeah. I thought it was so cool. You're talking about like, oh, like, God, just tell me what to do. Like, and I'm sure we've all had that experience before, like where we have big decisions in front of us, like, or we're like thinking about new ways we can do things and whatever. It's like, just tell me and I'll do it, because, for me, I can be very good at following instructions, because that's, like you touched on, like that's safe and that removes
Like the failure thing. It's like, well, if you just tell me what to do, I'll follow the steps and we'll all be good. So I would love for you to just touch on how the elements that you think faith, risk, vulnerability play into us being creative people and effectively creating.
Oh man. Creativity is so vulnerable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, I think about writing a song or, when I've done design or anything kind of artistic, in many ways you're putting a part of yourself out there to be critiqued, to be approved of or thrown in the garbage.
Yeah.
And it feels very vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think that is something really beautiful for us to actually just embrace and to recognize when our identity is really securely grounded in who God's made us to be. We stop looking, I suppose, and some of this is a bit idealistic because we're not there necessarily, but we stop looking at the approval of other people.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, was that pleasing to you, God? And I've thought about this with worship before. I've thought about, sometimes I get off the stage after having sung a song, and I think, man, I didn't do that as well as I could. I did,
Yeah.
And then I have to stop myself and just say, but it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for them.
Yeah.
It was for him. So at the end of the day, is our creativity pleasing to God?
Yeah.
Is our expression even of ourselves pleasing to him? Are we living that as worship? And that excites me to see a congregation, over the years to come that is actually growing in these kind of pioneering, innovative artistry giftings in every kind of sector of society.
Yeah.
And actually being willing to take those risks, to put themselves out there and express who God is through them.
Yeah, totally. And I think even the failure part that we talk about is such like a almost a dirty word, even when we use it in the concept of or in the context, of God and expressing God's nature. And I think there's this, it's like, well, we don't want to fail when we're doing that, right? But I think maybe there's elements where that's okay, where we can take risks and we can step out and we can aim to be creative and express God's nature and not get it right the first time, right? Because for you and I, we have the context of worship and music and stuff like that, and that's sort of maybe some of our primary creative expression, right? But I've written so many songs, so many, and most of them are really bad. You guys have maybe heard 2 or 3 that of the hundreds, right? Because most of them are bad. But I took a risk and I stepped out and I even songs I played in church before that was that one's not going to get played again, because but I think I think it's just so important that we don't allow the fear of failure to stop us from creating and taking risk.
Yeah. And
I think it's scary because I don't want to, if we're doing this, we're talking about express the nature of God. I don't want to do that wrong. I don't want to fail when I'm doing that. But I think God is so gracious and so kind that if we have the right heart and we're God, I want to express your nature. I want to establish your kingdom on earth through my creativity. And I think being able to take risks is important to that. Having faith in that, and also being okay with the areas where we will fail and get it wrong the first time is so important too. So I think it would just be so beautiful if we had a congregation that was passionately pursuing creativity in all of their areas of influence, unafraid of failure, ready to take risks, full of faith. And I would think that would just be such a phenomenal thing to see within our church.
Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah.